And thanks for joining us here on PM Express. And yes, the return of the domestic debt exchange. When was the last time we had that? We had that when that whole controversy erupted over government's attempt to restructure its debt and invited individuals to join. And that started a whole raft of issues that indeed led to a protest, etc. It's back now. And the government has reopened the domestic debt exchange program. Is it a sign of government's desperation? That's what we're going to be looking at today on the show. I really want to get you to first appreciate why we are where we are, and then bring my guest in for a conversation. And let's start to look at this very important subject, because it's one that has, again today, generated a fair bit of controversy already, with all the groups coming together, including for the first time the banks. And remember, in the midst of the original domestic debt exchange, the banks were not talking. They were not openly, publicly objecting to the arrangement. This time, they've gone public with objections. That tells you that this latest reopening of the domestic debt exchange is going to be an issue. We know that the 18th of September 2023, the 13th rather, the new DDEP, well, don't call it, the reopened DDEP went live. That's what the government announced. And then 22nd September will be when it will expire. Then there will be the settlement day of 29th September there. That is a reopening settlement date. So this is the timeline that the government itself has set for this reopened domestic debt exchange. If you still hold on to government bonds that you haven't exchanged, government says, well, come back. But why? Because government told us that they have achieved the objectives of the initial domestic debt exchange. So what is it that government is offering you now? Government is offering you these incentives, the perks. The new instruments expected to be more liquid, according to the government, than the old bonds. What does that really mean? It means if you play in the sector, you can exchange that a bit more. You can trade it a bit more. It's more liquid. And you know, the old bonds that were people were holding on to that in exchange, the risk that they had faced and they still face is that you can't trade it. But the sense is that this, of course, is one that you can trade. Government could also prioritize payments on new instruments, and that is a very important point. And that raises a very fundamental point. When is it you're going to prioritize the payment of new instruments? What exactly is government suggesting? Does that mean that those who are holding on to the old bonds will have to struggle to get their coupons paid, and when their capital indeed mature, they will struggle? Is that what government is trying to say there? We'll get into that, because that is alarming for those people who hold on to the old bonds. Also, there will be improvement in the cash flow. This is the side that benefits government in this whole equation, the position of government and the supporting of debt sustainability. That's fundamentally to do this. But many people say this last bit here is really where the focus is. Government is hoping to get the second tranche of the IMF money in, but they need to meet a certain thresholds. Fundamentally, government hasn't met the key threshold when it comes to debt sustainability, and they want to meet it. Other than that, they're going to struggle with the IMF, and that is why they've opened up this debt exchange program. If we look at the eligible bonds, and if you compare to what it used to be, we have the GOG bonds, ESLA bonds, Dachi bonds, all of them in total of 12.9 billion. That is what government is now hoping to exchange. And I'll tell you an interesting story about the changing numbers as we went on, especially when government told us at the beginning that it's been successful. But if it's been successful, why do you need 12.9 billion more in terms of the exchange value of what they're trying to do? Is the key question. And then you look at the sort of bondholders that will be affected. Same as what we know before. If you are holding on to a bond and you are a natural person or you're an investment scheme and you are below 59 years, you will be affected by this particular reopened DDEP. Eligible holders above 59 years old as of 1st January will also be affected, and holders not found in A and B as well. And then you see the pensioner bondholders. They were exempted in the first one, but they have been included now, and they've made a point very categorically, and this is the Pensioner Bondholders Forum at the press conference today, that they should not be included because they were exempted in the first one. And that is one of those sticking points the government will still have to deal with. And then today, we have the coalition of individual bondholder groups also coming together with a statement. And their statement is a repetition of the initial stance that they took in the first DDEP, which is that they still will not participate in this. And this one is so voluntary, but they still will not participate in it. They will not sign on to the DDEP program. And that position has not changed. But they said something that I'll put to their leaders when they join me, that they believe that government is still committed to settling all maturing bonds and coupons, right? Where are they getting that assurance from? What is giving them that confidence that government is still committed? When government has clearly stated, as I showed you earlier, that they will prioritize these new bonds if you indeed exchange and get hold of one, right? If they are prioritizing that, it means that they will pay those new bonds, this current bond that they're exchanging right now, they'll pay them first. And whatever is left is what everybody else will get. If it's finished by that time, then of course, people get to struggle. So where are they getting this confidence from? We'll get into that subsequently. And then you look at the dates of a lot of the bonds that are maturing. In fact, today as we speak, one of the bonds mature. The key question is, has government paid up today? And can they pay up the rest of it going forward? Remember, it's all part of the economic crisis we are facing and the IMF program that we are currently under. Now, I find this very interesting. And this is something that we did at the very initial stages of this whole debt restructuring program that government and Ghana was entering into. The IMF itself has guidelines for doing restructuring. One of the key guidelines that the IMF tells countries to do is about the do's and don'ts. Is one, you have to restructure. Make sure is it deep enough. Make sure it is deep enough. And why is that important? When it's deep enough, make sure the amount you're exchanging will really have a significant impact on your debt sustainability question. Clearly, government is doing this because it hasn't met its debt sustainability targets. In other words, what they've done so far hasn't been deep enough. One of the key things IMF says, don't do. Don't do a restructuring program that isn't deep enough. Clearly, that's what we've done. Secondly, and this is the favorite part, that the debt restructuring program must be comprehensive, must also be implemented together with other packages. So you just don't do that, you do other things. What has government done? Government said they've cut, the salaries of, some executive members, but fundamentally, as has been suggested, they should cut the size of government. But I like this bit. You have to handle it with care, right? Cast your net wide, be clear and transparent, and do it right the first time. And for me, this is the paramount point here. Do it right the first time. This is the IMF own guideline for debt restructuring. Do it right the first time. Do you know how many debt exchange programs that we've been on since we started this whole initiative? It's been quite a bit. We have failed to do it right the first time. If we did it right the first time, we would not be reopening it now. That is a cardinal sin, a cardinal don't do when it comes to restructuring of any debt, according to the IMF itself, right? So that's a very important point to note. And if you look at this, we haven't also been transparent. We haven't been clear because the numbers keep changing. We first wanted to action 137 billion. Then it moved to 132 billion, then 130 billion, and then ended up 97.7 billion. So the numbers keep changing. That in itself shows you that there's something fundamentally wrong with our approach in doing this. And then over the period, we've done several DDEPs, a total of 4 of them. There was the regional DDEP, the US dollar denominated DDEP. Pension funds were then invited in after they had been exempted, and then it has been reopened again. Everywhere you look, there are questions. I'll put that to my guests next, here on PM Express. Always brought to you by Cherry Tree Properties. It's also brought to you by Syntex Tank and also by the Ghana AIDS Commission and Alobo Bitter. Stay with me.
Daddy, This tank is big.
Yes, that's true.
It can store a lot of water.
That's so true.
Wow. It has a working tortoise on it.
That's so true.
I can see SINTEX. Syntax.
That is so true, my daughter.
When it falls down, it will spoil.
That's not true.
But why?
Hey! Syntex was the first to introduce double-layer tanks in Ghana. Syntex again was the first to introduce white inner layers in Ghana. Syntex gives you the biggest warranty, 7 years. No matter your water needs, Syntex is the answer. Syntex tank. Are you strong? Are you tough?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to demonstrate to you the superior properties of Flamingo paint. As compared to other paint brands on the market, we take equal quantities of Flamingo paint and this ordinary paint. We then dilute them with water. And now, let the test begin. The gentleman on the left is going to apply the ordinary paint, and the gentleman on my right will use the Flamingo superior paint. As you can clearly see, Flamingo has the obvious better hiding. Furthermore, Flamingo has painted a much larger area. You know, 1 bucket of Flamingo paint is equal to several buckets of any other paint brand on the market. Flamingo paint is made with superior formulation to give superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage. Flamingo paint, simply superior.
Can he tee up someone in red? And it goes to one.
That's who goal is for. I got 5 Champions League. You want to know? I be the real goal. Chairman. I'm the real goal. The left magician. The left magician.
Who is the goat? Ghana Jollof or Nigeria Jollof?
Ghana Jollof has no co-equal. The smell alone. Oh my God.
No, that shift. You two they lie. Eh? Now the same stew when they use cook the rice and then they go put them for top.
You are lying. Ghana Jollof.
Are you busy? Forget everybody. Yeah, my guy. Put some respect on the goat. On the goat. The only goat I know lives in Tama. Every year we dey give to you back to back. We are talking about PET. I want some Yaji face. Except be the goat. Huh? My guy, he be the goat.
Though our choice of goats may differ in football, music, and jollof, Alomo Bitters always brings us together. Alomo, experience greatness in every moment.
Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18 and recommended to pregnant women. This advert is FDA approved.
Hello, my name is Abeku Agri Santana. If there's anything that makes my life so easy, it is my bank. I love hanging out with my boys at our usual fufu joint. But even without cash, we still dey chop better with EcoBank Mobile. No matter the time of day, my bank helps me stay in touch with my beautiful wife whenever she's away. And when my beautiful wife is in town, she never misses out on her favorite TV shows because I'm able to pay up all my TV subscriptions from the comfort of my mobile phone. Whenever she has to get groceries too, my bank makes it cashless and convenient. And the part my wife loves the most is when my bank makes it possible and easy for her to shop from any part of the world without moving.
Welcome to the smart world of EcoBank. Download EcoBank Mobile from Google Play Store or the App Store and discover the smart way to bank. EcoBank, the Pan-African bank.
There are days when you think, whoa, today I've earned it. So order a Glovo. Days when plans run longer. What if we order a Glovo? Or days when you can't control everything. Oh yes, because on Glovo, you can order anything you want. Glovo, you order, we deliver.
Daddy, this tank is big.
Yes, that's true.
It can store a lot of water.
That's so true.
Wow, it has a working tortoise on it.
That's so true.
I can see SINTEX. Syntax.
That is so true, my daughter.
When it falls down, it will spoil.
That's not true.
But why?
Hey! Syntex was the first to introduce double-layer tanks in Ghana. Syntex again was the first to introduce white inner layers in Ghana. Syntex gives you the biggest warranty, 7 years. No matter your water needs, Syntex is the answer. Syntex tank. Are you strong? Are you tough?
Crazy pa. Don't stop me now, me.
Whiskey.
Wash. All of a sudden, my voice are different. And when you saw a call. Barman, bring me the honey whiskey. You know the one? Black Rock whiskey.
Honey whiskey.
Shale, honey near dear frau. Black Rock whiskey is strong. Now so taste me is smooth and it goes down easy. Excuse me. Barman, bring my friend one Black Rock whiskey.
Black Rock whiskey, blended with natural honey flavor.
Hey, what's up?
Barman.
Hey, what the hell for Sikanton Sata? The Pia Bin Tomana no.
Black Rock whiskey can be the feeling smoothness, no.
Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18 years of age and not recommended for pregnant women. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
About 1/3 of a million people live with HIV in Ghana. Close to 10,000 of them die each year, mostly as a result of a lack of antiretroviral drugs and adherence. In fact, close to 57% of children under 14 years living with HIV do not receive antiretroviral drugs, again as a result of inadequate funds to provide them with medication.
Life expectancy for these children is grim. The big worry, close to 16,300 people are newly infected with HIV each year. With this alarming rate of HIV infections, all of us are in danger, and Ghana is headed for an epidemic explosion if nothing is done now to avert it. While the Ghana AIDS Commission is working hard to overturn the situation, the Commission urgently needs funding support from corporate Ghana and individuals to save lives. We're therefore appealing to you, corporate entities and individuals, to support the National HIV and AIDS Fund by dialing star 9898# on MTN and Vodafone and follow the prompts, or pay into the National HIV and AIDS Fund account number 101-863-161-3233, Bank of Ghana. Your donation will be used to prevent new infections and provide care for people living with HIV, including children affected by AIDS. For further information, please call Ghana AIDS Commission on 0302 919260 or email info@Ghana.
Sebastian Gorka here. I'm living a very blessed life as an intelligence analyst, a national talk show host, and author, and I have an amazing family. But like many of us, aches and pains start to interfere with living my best life, even just walking the dog. But I found Relief Factor 3 years ago, a 100% drug-free solution for aches and pains, and now I'm pain-free, and I have my life back. I take Relief Factor every day. Relief Factor can help your body fight the inflammation that causes joint and muscle pain and other aches and pains that come with everyday life. Treat yourself to feeling better, move more, live more, and just enjoy your life more with Relief Factor. Join me and more than 500,000 other Americans. Get started today with your 3-week quick starter pack for just $19.95. Almost 70% of those who order go on to use it more. ReliefFactor.com. That's ReliefFactor.com. Feel the difference with Relief Factor.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Kind of like choosing Derek Jeter as the pinch hitter for your baseball team.
Jeter, you're in. We need a home run.
I'll give it a try. I've swung a bat once or twice.
That's out of here. Yep, even easier than that. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One NA, member FDIC.
IDS.gov.gh. Give to save a life today. Ghana AIDS Commission, partnering to eliminate HIV and AIDS.
Thanks for staying with us. And as you know, PMSS is always brought to you by Syntex Tank. No matter your water needs, Syntex Tank has you covered indeed. It's also brought to you by Territory Properties. Now, Syntex Tank is the tank of choice for you. And they have everything you need when it comes to water storage. Syntex Tank is first to introduce a double-layer tank. And now you can have as many layers as you want. The Syntex Tanks is first to introduce white inner layer tanks in Ghana. We now introduce you to customer specs order. We let you order any color and size of preference. Syntex Tank gives you the longest warranty of up to 7 years, which no other tank gives you in Ghana. So whatever your water consumption, size of product or demand, choose Syntex Tanks. We have agents nationwide. Call them on 0244-335-168 or shop online at syntex.com. Syntex Tanks, a strong, a tough. Joining me right now for a conversation is Dr. Edu Ananientwi, and you know him. Dr. Edu Ananientwi is the convener of the Pensioner Bondholders Forum and immediate past, boss of SEC. So he knows this terrain, and he's been holding a press conference today. Professor Godfred Bokpin is an economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School. Dr. Joel Jangma Akwete is a convener of the Individual Bondholders Association of Ghana. And John Ewa is the president of the Ghana Association of Banks. And I want to start with John Ewa, obviously. John, thanks for agreeing to talk to me on this very important subject. We saw today the details of this. There have been a lot of agitations as far as this is concerned. I wonder, the banks, what your position is on this reopening. Are the banks going to be participating in it?
Thank you very much for having me. As you may have learned from the banks, I granted an interview to your colleague, about a week or so ago, where I stated clearly the position of the banking industry. The point is that when it comes to the government's debt operations, bond exchange, the banks are fully subscribed to the exchange. As we speak, there is no room or whatever securities that the banks have in their possession to tender anymore. So I do not believe or think that this reopening has the banks as a target investor to take any decisions on exchange.
Okay, so that's out of the question. Banks are not going to be participating in this latest round of BDEP. That's correct. I wonder if there were any consultations with the banks before this was reopened at all?
Not directly. I'm sure the issuer definitely will be aware of the participation of the banks. So if there was any kind of consultation that was necessary, definitely will be with the investor groups that have yet to respond in one way or the other to the offer. We have the offshore investors, some of whom did not tender. We have the individual bondholders and other pockets of investor groups, like corporate bodies that also did not subscribe. It is possible that they may have been consulted, but since we were not a target of this particular reopening, we were definitely not in the loop as to the level of communication or pre-meetings that were held before the reopening.
I mean, Joel, from the individual bondholders' point of view, I've seen your statement in which you clear that your position hasn't changed. Your position is that this is not something that you will participate in, but it's open nonetheless. And the government had said in their notice that this particular exchange, those who take it, they will get priority when it comes around to payment. Have there been any further engagements with government since this went public last week?
Right. Thank you, Evans. No, we haven't had any formal engagements with government since this was published last week. But then prior to this second round of local Ghana City bond debt exchange. We had some arrangements and some engagements with government, and I think that we had made it pretty clear where we stood with regards to the local debt exchange. And so, as far as we're concerned, the target group, like Mr. Wa was saying, even though government has said that individual bondholders are open to also subscribe, we as individual bondholders who refused to sign the first time still stand on our ground pertaining to re-signing. We're not going to do that. And I think government is full aware of this decision that we have taken. And we had prior engagements with government, and they mentioned in some of our meetings the collective investment schemes and some corporate bodies who didn't sign on. And so as far as we are concerned, we believe that this second round may be more directed towards them. However, government decided to open its net wide and cast wide and see whether I would catch any. But as an organization or as a body, we're still resolute on our earlier decision.
Okay, Dr. Oduananointwi, you held a press conference today, and you were categorical that this is something you're participating. However, you were granted an exemption. This particular reopened DDEP explicitly includes your members. Have you managed to reach out to the ministry for some clarity on this matter? Hello, Dr. Oduananointwi. Okay, we would. Hello, Dr. Oduananointwi.
Yeah, I think he's muted. All right.
Okay.
I'm here.
Great that I could hear you. I was asking you whether this includes your members who were exempted. Have you sought some clarity? Today there was a press conference. Since then, have you heard anything?
No, I think it's too early. We sent a letter to the minister this morning.
Okay.
Pointing out that we see some irregularities in the invitation, that you could not extend that invitation to cover it. So we think there's an error and they should correct. And that's why we had the press conference. And so we are waiting for the reaction of the ministry.
Why do you think it's an error?
It's an error.
Why?
If you have been exempted, nobody can invite you to come and participate in any reopening, unless the exemptions have been cancelled.
Isn't that obvious?
You know what they are doing.
Isn't that obvious? Because this was drafted, carefully thought out, and circulated.
That is not how you cancel an exemption. That is not how you cancel an exemption. So if they want to invite us, they must first cancel the exemption. Then you know you are now not under exemption. So now you can invite that person. Now that I have removed the cover, I'm inviting you to come if you want to come. If the ministry want to do that, then this is the way they should proceed. But I believe it's an error. They never thought, they didn't apply their minds to the fact that you could not extend an invitation to an exempted group. We are not part of the people who could not. I repeat, their own words, that people who wanted to come but could not come because of certain reasons. We are not part of them. So I think the ministry should look at the things that it puts in the public domain well, study it, critically review it, because you see, you are bringing this to the public. It's not your private document. Once you are coming to public, there's a need to ensure that the document you are putting there, you have analyzed it and you understand and appreciate. Well, because people are going to review it.
And that is precisely why I question why you conclude that it's an error.
It's an error because I see that you can't do what you are doing. You can only do it in error.
Okay.
Unless if you don't agree that it was an error, then it was a deliberate attempt to lure people to come. But I don't think the government will do that deliberate attempt. I believe it's an error, and they will own up to that and say, well, unfortunately, we shouldn't have even put your name there.
I mean, Professor Bokwing, government had consistently said since the DDEP1 that they've been successful in achieving the targets and its objectives. They've celebrated that. So why are they reopening this?
Good evening. Good evening to our cherished listeners and viewers. Yeah, so Evans, you recall on this same program a couple of months ago where we said that government was celebrating a success that it didn't really, wasn't really success. It was pretty clear to us that government didn't get exactly what it wanted. And I'm saying this from different perspectives. One, if you look at so first, when you estimate the gap that we had to close from the debt sustainability analysis, it was clear that fiscal adjustment alone was not enough. It was clear to us. And then more so, it became much clearer to us after the IMF published their documents. The total fiscal savings from the IMF-supported program comes up to 5% of GDP. We are looking at a gap in excess of 12% of GDP. Actually, if you look at the September last year end date, where the debt to GDP ratio was both in present value terms and then also the other debt sustainability indicators, of course, the IMF focused solely on two, present value of debt to GDP ratio being below 55%, and then also external debt service to revenue ratio below 18%. There are other debt sustainability indicators. So then if you compare that to the level of savings that the government made from the first round of domestic debt exchange, where they were only able to restructure approximately 83.3 billion cedis out of the universe of eligible bonds, which eventually came down to approximately 98 billion, it was clear to us that government had made insufficient progress. So we said that no, even though government said they had made progress, I mean, they had won, even when it was not even half time, we knew there would be subsequent invitations. Because at that time, we had almost 123 billion cedis of domestic debt yet to be restructured, made up of Bank of Ghana's own 77.6 billion cedis, the pension 29.2 billion cedis. Then you had the US denominated local bonds, 800 million, cocoa bill, 8.8 billion cedis, and all of that. Then we had excluded the treasury bill angle. So if you look at this portion and you look at the progress government had made, there was no way you could conclude government was successful with the first one. Then so there you could predict that this other component of the domestic debt were at risk. Of course, we've seen that even with the configuration, Evans, you realize that we had to use Bank of Ghana's balance sheet as a balancing item so that we could make much progress towards the goal. Because at the end of the day, all of these things is geared towards a certain end game, right? 2028. Bring your debt to a more sustainable level. So the fiscal sustainability part to it had to be very clear. All right. So put all this thing together. Then you see, Evans, that the motive for the domestic debt exchange also was to introduce a new yield curve of below 15%. Under normal circumstances, that is only possible when certain conditions are present. Inflation was very high, right? And then the currency wasn't stable. So you realize that the new yield curve government was trying to introduce, which would have moderated our interest cost, because the yield curve failed. So we practically abandoned that, because so you will see that right after the first round of the domestic debt exchange, government tries to force down the treasury bill rate. It was essentially dragging it down to align it with the new yield curve. Now, but because of where inflation was and also because of the fiscal gap, that didn't work. So now you will see that the savings that government had made with whatever restructuring that we had done, when you do the analysis, you see that even the rising treasury bill cost is almost offsetting that. We are almost getting to the point of zero-sum game, right? So if you put all these things together, it tells you that even though government made some progress, government didn't get exactly what they wanted. Now, so if there's any opportunity, right, if there's any opportunity through administrative reopening for government to see if they could rope in those who didn't tender, government will grab that with both hands. But let me come here before I end my first submission. We are in this situation also because domestic bondholders failed themselves. Why am I saying so? It would have been better, and we have said this much earlier, form a domestic creditor committee. Then you are able to look at all these things holistically, both from the fiscal side, from structural adjustment, structural reform, what savings can be made, and then also from debt restructuring. So in the case of Ghana, everybody went in solely to protect themselves and to see what they could get. And at the end, through divide and rule and all of that, this is what has brought us here.
Yeah, let me put that. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Let me put that to Jangba. Doc, what do you make of that? Hello, Joel.
Right, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I think that what Prof. Popking is saying, we actually worked on something similar to that. We came together, as you would reckon, we're now the coalition of individual bondholders, and we came together and engaged government, actually, in looking at ways of dealing with the debt exchange. But we didn't really get, at the initial stages when the DDEP was open, the local DDEP was open, we really didn't get the reception that we expected. We had government trying to muscle us into accepting it without actually engaging us as much as we would want. We're still looking at the possibility of doing that. That what Prof. Bobkin was suggesting, but it's like he said, it's a bit difficult at this point because government is already.
To put it bluntly, it's too late, isn't it?
Yes.
For that to happen. But you have to answer the question. In this reopened DDEP, government says the bonds that will be exchanged will have priority. That means one thing. The bonds that you are holding currently will not have priority when it comes to payments.
Right. Okay, so even even though we've seen that documentation, we've seen that writing, for us that hold the old bonds, we're still very convinced that government will or owes us that responsibility of honoring them.
But I asked that question earlier. What is giving you that assurance that government will commit to honoring those bonds now that they are actually telling you that they haven't met their targets and they need 12 billion more?
Right. Okay. So I think that we had engagements with government before we got to this point. And we had some assurances, and we actually signed some agreement with government before this local, this reopening of the local DDEP again. So as far as we're concerned, like Dr. Edouard mentioned, we had an arrangement with them before this. And so if there's any change to that arrangement, we would believe that it would be communicated to us. So as far as we are also concerned, there is an arrangement that has been put down, and we are hoping and we believe that government does not intend to renege on its promise, which we have signed, and I think you had some in circulation. And so we really believe that government is going to do what it set out to do with us per the agreements we've had.
I want to bring in John Ewa into the conversation because the banks played a very significant role in the first part of this, and they carried the bulk of the burden. And the reason largely the reason why government had said that it was successful the first time was because the banks carried a fair share of the burden there. I mean, Mr. Wam, I'm curious though. Has government kept faith with the terms of the DDEP you participated in?
I would say yes and no. No, because there's one key deliverable from the agreement we had with the government, which is yet to see the light of day. Though we have very good assurances, and we've seen some steps in recent days on the setup of Financial Stability Fund, with a critical pillar in all the discussions that we had with government. We know letters have gone out to various stakeholder groups on nomination of members for the investment committee of the Financial Stability Fund. We were told a few weeks ago that by the end of September, we are heading towards the end of September, so we are quite hopeful that something will be launched before the end of September. That is the assurance that we have from government. That said, of course, we've had one round of coupon payments, which was paid on due dates, which was a very important milestone to achieve. That right from the first obligations under the debt exchange has been met. Of course, there are significant repayments that will be due in the coming years, particularly the first maturity payment. And that will be the very clear test of commitments to the program. But as we know, the window for failing on this program is very, very small. Any kind of access going forward to the capital market is very much dependent on the success rate on, particularly on the performance of the bonds under the program. So we are very hopeful that government, knowing the consequences of non-performance on the bonds under the program, will definitely continue, just like they did in August when the first coupons were due, to continue to commit, and be bound, as we signed the agreement to that effect, that all commitments under the program will be met on due dates. And those are very critical. The international market is in that space, and I'm not sure the country want to put ourselves in a situation where we've reprofiled our debt, we begin default on the reprofiled debt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wise stay with me, because on that point, though, if you read this reopened DDEP, one of the justifications or reasons provided is that government wants to achieve its debt sustainability targets. Now, that target has a direct impact on the ability to pay when the coupons fall due, because if it's not sustainable, then you struggle to pay. Isn't there a link there? And down the line, if this additional 12 billion isn't cleared, that then comes back to affect everybody else in the system. And the government has made the point. It's the whole sustainability and the survival of this economy at stake. Reason why they've had to do this.
Yes, of course, you're absolutely right. Why did we enter into this kind of program? It was because we wanted to achieve an end game to our debt crisis. And to the extent that that end game is not reached yet, there remains some risk to be managed. And intelligence that we are picking is there are other bondholders who could not come under the program when it first launched, who have maybe indicated to government that they want to now come in, knowing that the first coupons were paid. Perhaps it serves as an attractive welcome for them to now, track their steps backwards to now opt into the program. It's important that the program succeeds, because otherwise those of us who have already entered, then we'll have a crisis on our hands. And as a country, it will not be very good on us as a country generally, that we enter into a debt operations program where we agree specific covenants with investors. Investors have paid the price by subscribing, and at the end of it, there is a failure of a sort. So I'm beginning to put a lot of mileage on the intelligence that we have gathered, that there are willing investors who really want to opt into the program. But of course, that window closed at some stage, and reopening it gives them opportunity to now perhaps come under the program. And the more we have such events happening, that leads us into that end game, the better it is for all of us. But the thing is, it's two sides to the coin. As we are looking at the debt operations, I heard Professor Bopkin also talking about particularly on the expenditure and the government side of things. I mean, both sides must move. So we are also hopeful that as bondholders are taking this serious pill, that side where we are critically looking at our expenditure pattern as a country to also contribute to plug in whatever fiscal
you haven't seen that enough yet. I remember that was part of the assurances that convinced everybody else who wanted to participate, including the banks who carried a bit of the burden. You're saying that even after all the sacrifices you made, you haven't seen enough of the expenditure cuts to match your contribution.
Reopening of the program, attests to a fact that there is still a gap to be plugged. And what I'm saying is that gap should not be looked at from only one window. There are various sides to the coin, and therefore we should be open to whatever things. Just like we did the program, closed it, and realized that no, maybe we are not where we anticipated to be at this stage, and therefore we are reopening for investors to pay a lot more price. On the other side, we must also reopen, even if there have been significant savings, we must begin looking at our fish properly to see where else we can cut.
Okay. Dr. Donanantwi, give me a quick comment on that. I mean, so the 12 billion government is asking for, John Ewa is making the point that don't just look at bondholders, but cut from within the government machinery itself somehow to bridge that 12 billion that you require. Do you have Dr. Donanantwi there? Okay, let me put that question to Professor Bokpin. Prof, it's a valid point, is it not?
Absolutely. There's no better way of putting it. I agree with Mr. Ewa. Look, government is still spending as though there is no debt crisis. Okay, government is still living a lifestyle that suggests that it's a harvest time. If you look at our approach towards our elections and all of that, it tells you that really, this approach of royals versus subjects being creditors can be treated anyhow, any way, and all of that. I think it's not good for nation building. It's not good for building your own financial markets. And because you see, if you look at the approach government is adopting, clearly, there's very less value actually placed on consultation and recognizing creditors as important stakeholders in all of this. And therefore, it didn't matter much if government didn't even consult those people before even coming out with this reopening and all of that, when they had been exempted and all of that. One would have thought that after such a painful process, we'll be moving quite quickly to bring a closure to this whole domestic debt exchange so that the country can build forward better and inclusively, right? Because you need to generate trust, okay, in your financial system. And so it's a bit concerning the way we are going. And then also, Evans, if you look at the fiscal framework, you will see that there is considerable room to make expenditure-based fiscal adjustment that will lessen the burden on creditors. The narrative has been that debt restructuring seems to be the only way out of this. And that is why I'm saying that from the beginning, if domestic creditors had come together from a bit of more organized and negotiating from position of strength, there would have been clarity in terms of scope of adjustment from fiscal, debt restructuring, and all of that, so that it is clear to all of us.
But Prof, they came together. They formed the individual bondholder. They have now the coalition, and they actually sat with government, negotiated, actually made proposals, and signed these proposals off with government themselves in terms of the roadmap towards their sustainability. It was
still based on creditor type. So if you look at what is happening from the international perspective, we have the Euro bondholders, we have the regional, we have the international. The idea that, okay, we are forming ours, this one is forming theirs, and then all of that. Usually, when it happens that way, the government will be able to find a way around it, right? Okay.
Prof, if I may.
And we know. Let me. Sorry. Okay.
Yes. Jangma?
No, I've heard Prof, say this a couple of times, but we had a difficulty talking about coming together to form a creditor forum, have one negotiation front. I can tell you efforts were made in that direction. The unfortunate thing is that for a creditor forum to be successful, you must align interest. Interest must be aligned. We had an unfortunate situation where, as banks, we knew what was at stake, particularly at that time when the negotiations started and the discussions that we had had, and the kind of gap that had been opened up to us, the information that we did not know before. And therefore, we decided that in order to help in the solution side of things, we would rather work with government to have a deal that perhaps is not too good for us, but that saves the country as well. So it was a problem of alignment of objectives. We had a group that said we want to be completely exempt. And then we had a group that said, okay, we know there's a problem. And we are a significant holder. If we on radio also saying we want to be exempt, we know that clearly we want to work with government to have a solution that, in our words, works for the country. It was difficult coming together when our interests were a bit divergent at some point. Of course, nobody takes delight in taking a cut on interest from 27% to 9% on average. But these were critical moments, and there were a lot of moving parts. That is why we had that semblance of groupings instead of a main creditor forum to address the issues that we had at hand.
Yeah, Jangba?
Right, yeah. I think that Mr. Wah has actually put out some of the points that I would have raised. That in us coming together, I mean, as individual bondholders, we also were a chunk of those who were supposed to tender in the local debt exchange. We had some issues as well, and I don't think it would be necessary to mention them here. But then, as much as possible, those majority of us that aligned came together and we pursued a common interest. And through that, we engaged government, we sat down, we had a technical committee that was formed in the initial phase, looked at ways, like Prof. Bob King had said, for government to cut down on their expenses. There was an elaborate presentation that was made to government in the very early stages of the local DDP, and government said they were going to go back. They came back, and they still brought us a second proposal that we still didn't think was good enough for the individual bondholders, and that is when we took the decision not to partake. Now, going forward after the local DDP was closed, we went ahead and still had engagements with government, because we still also identified that there was a problem, but we also needed government to make that firm commitment towards the individual bondholders who had put their monies into government and were hoping that government would be able to honor them. And we actually finally have made some headway. Recently, we were able to meet government and we got the MOU signed that covered all individual bondholders. And so what Prof. Bobkin was saying would have been the ideal situation. But then when you're dealing with groups of people, you understand that sometimes the dynamics of the group and interests may not always align. But to the best of our ability, we have done what we think would be in the best interest of the majority of individual bondholders across the country. And so that's where we are now. Yeah. And we believe that we're going to, government is going to go ahead and honor the agreements we have made with them.
And that's where you take your confidence from. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, the fundamental question that remains, individual bondholders, pensioner bondholders, a coalition of bondholders, and of course the banks have said they will not be participating in this reopened DDP. But government still needs 12 billion exchanged. What's the implication of that on our IMF program and the next milestone that we have to meet to qualify for the next threshold? How does that impact us? We're going to answer that question when we return. Stay with us. It's 11 p.m. Express having a conversation about our economy and as the reopening of the domestic debt exchange, that appears never to end. Professor Bokwing, to you now. I mean, just before we wrap up, I need to understand this 12 billion the government is seeking to exchange. How important is the success of this latest reopened DDEP to our IMF program as it relates to the next tranche receipt?
Okay, yes, Evans, thank you very much. Typically, when you look at the program, the way it's structured, we have the end June targets, structural benchmarks, and all of that. So the next critical review will be looking at the June end targets that have been set under the program. But because this is a 3-year program, they are going to review the past as at the end of June 2023. And then they are also going to adopt a forward-looking approach to see the progress we have made, the outlook, and then in terms of how the whole program is on course. My considered view is that this specific reopening may not be significant enough to derail the country's progress towards passing the next review, and we're getting the other $600 million. I'm looking at it from two angles, that it will not be good news, even for the IMF itself, with all the efforts and also the progress that government has made in the last 3 months or so, to say that the country failed to meet those conditionalities. Then again, also, if you look at how the IMF had worked over the years with other programs, there could be room for certain modifications, right? Because if you look at the 16th IMF program that we exited in April 2019, yes, we were not able to meet all the targets as enshrined in the program. And therefore, there may be some kind of modification where necessary. Evans, the important thing is that the incentive for government to work towards meeting these conditionalities and passing this critical review is also very high because of the dollar deficit, right, that we have to manage. The 600 million is very important. And that signal will also be good in terms of the necessary progress that we have to make with the external debt restructuring. That, of course, from the fiscal side, government is doing what it had committed to under the program.
And Prof, we just touched on a very important one that we still need to discuss, which is the extent of the restructuring, a big next step the government is pursuing. Thank you very much for joining us, John Ewa, Joe Jangba, also Professor Godfrey Bokwing and Dr. Dunano Yankee. We'll see what government does at the end of this latest reopened DDEP. The rest of evening.